Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the People First podcast, a space where teachers may address the challenge of viewing themselves as people first and teachers second. Today, we are talking with Dr. Dorshele Stewart, a Ball State professor, expert on social studies education, and advocate for what she refers to as brave teaching. Today, she and I are going to be talking about her concept of brave teaching, the connection between brave teaching and professional development geared toward self-exploration, self-care, and self-healing, and the role of advocacy in the mix of each of these things. With that, we'll get this ball rolling. Hello, Dr. Stewart. How are you today?
Emma, I am awesome. I'm awesome. Good to be on here. Good to be on here.
I'm so glad to have you here. Just to get us started, can you go ahead and explain what brave teaching means to you? Where did you get the idea for this concept? How does this play out in your everyday life? And maybe even touch on like how it has evolved for you over time.
Sure. Well, let's see. Brave teaching. It came to me. Well, first of all, I view it to be a professional stance. Okay. If educators say they are committed to teach social studies and even other subjects in its most meaningful, authentic way, then that's what I call being a brave educator. This is a conversation that I was having with myself about, man, what does it really take to do this thing efficiently? And I've been using this phrase as I've been teaching the social studies methods class here at Ball State for, it's 2021. So maybe about 5 years, every year an academic semester feels like a year. So in my mind, I'm thinking for about 5 years, and it really could have been about 2. I'm just thinking about each semester. But for the past few years, whenever I would talk about what it means to teach social studies, realizing that the Department of Education fully discloses on their website that the standards are not the curriculum, realizing that, making that explicitly known to my pre-service teachers, soon to be colleagues. I mean, we go to the Department of Education website, pull that up and look at it. Then looking at the social justice teaching standards by Learning for Justice, formerly known as Teaching Tolerance, looking at their standards, it really came to me to say, okay, the holdup is us as the teacher. That's the holdup. The textbook that I use to assist me in teaching the book is published by Walter Parker. He's a former middle school teacher. His book is, Teaching Social Studies in the Elementary School. It's a title similar to that. I might have left out a few letters or words here and there, but that's overall the essence of the book. And I love Walter Parker's definition. He calls it the primary mission of teaching social studies is to educate citizens. I love that definition. And he said we do that by giving them content knowledge, and we also do it by helping them know how to think, teaching our students to think and act democratically. So I've been rolling with Walter Parker. I've been using his book for my entire time here at Ball State, which will be 11 years in the fall. So I've been using his book for more than 11 years because I was teaching at IU for a while, working on my doctorate in the social studies education program, still using that same book. But it wasn't until about 5 years ago, again, setting up the class, talking about what it means to teach social studies, primary mission, looking at what the Department of Education defines the standards to be and not to be, and then balancing that with those social justice teaching standards, I realized, the holdup for us really educating citizens is the teacher. That's the holdup. If we say we're going to educate citizens, we are actually deciding how far we're going to go, be it social studies, math, science, any of the other content areas. It's up to us to really decide, am I going to lean in and view these students as future citizens? Yes, they're in third grade right now. They're adorable. Yes, they're in kindergarten, big heads, little bodies. We want to keep them there forever. But eventually, they are going to be independent adults functioning on this planet. And we as educators have the awesome, humbled privilege and opportunity to help educate them to function independently in this society. And when you view it that way, it's more than just math skills. It's more than just teaching you I before E except after C. It's more than identifying Canada on a map. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is a citizen. Hold on, I've got to lean in and take advantage of this. So that's why I call it being brave. It is a professional stance. It's saying, okay, I'm going to lean in and do this. So when it evolved over the past 5 years, but more specifically, about 2 years ago, I was nominated through Ball State for the Excellence in Teaching Award. That students actually nominate a professor that they think are doing an awesome job teaching. So kudos and thank you to students that nominated me. And so the opportunity was, how if you could have a dream course, or if what's your personal stance, what's your belief on teaching? And so I had an opportunity to just talk about how I teach my class, and that's when I formally sat down and defined brave teaching. So I define it pretty much by just some core beliefs. It's a commitment. Now, this is all, I'm a social studies person, so I made it connected to social studies, but some of the things could probably connect with other subject areas. So a brave teacher is someone who has a commitment to advocate for the marginalized in the classroom, the school, community, and society at large, and not just at school, but also in my personal life, because students can sense when you're trying to feed them something that you're not eating. Okay, so you've got to fully commit to it, commit to advocate, and advocate the way that looks true to you. Your level of advocacy, Emma, may look very different from mine, and vice versa. But as long as I'm committed to do it in the class, in the school, in the community, and society at large, then I'm being authentic. Okay, I also, secondly, I affirm who my students are. So that means their culture, their identities. I affirm that by the way that I teach, the resources that I use in my classroom, and just our classroom culture, our habits, our practices, our tendencies. I think about how it's set up, and I ask myself, do I ask my students to shut off who they are by the books that I'm reading? Am I affirming who students are, asking them to shut away who they are by the posters I have up in the classroom? Like, as a teacher, you really look at everything. Is this applauding students, or is this booing them? Right? So you commit to advocate for you advocate, and then you affirm who they are. Thirdly, this is how it connects to me for social studies. I realize just how important social studies is, the role it plays in helping our young citizens, they're not just students, our young citizens learn how to treat others democratically. This is the vehicle to help students know how to function in society with people who are like them, people who are different from them, and not viewing it as a shortcoming, but actually acknowledging, wow, we've got some differences, and we're not going to work with them despite differences. No, because I hear people say that, well, I know we've got differences, but we're going to work despite that. I hear a different connotation when you say despite that. I'm like, no, 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 not despite. We're going to work together considering. Let's bring that in. And social studies helps students do that. And then finally, if I'm committed to advocate, I'm going to affirm who my students are. I realize social studies is a content area that gives me permission to do this. Lastly, I'm going to commit to intentionally integrate social studies in everything that I can. So I don't just leave it in the social studies block in school, because quiet is kept. There really isn't one. Social studies rarely gets taught independently on its own. So you find ways to intermingle it with math, with reading, with writing. I intentionally connect it to other subjects, which means I got to do my own homework. I got to know my stuff so that I can find a way to infuse it. And by doing those four things, I believe that's what makes an educator brave. And so it isn't some deep thing. It's just really, this is a quote that I really put up when I have my classes. And it's a true saying. You do not have to ask permission to be an educator. You've taken your coursework, you're taking it now. You've passed your exams, you've taken the Pearson, that state license, that diploma from your university says you have my consent. You have consent from your principal, you've got consent from the state superintendent, whoever else signs off on that document, President Mearns, here, president of Ball State, or any other university, they're saying you have our consent, you have our blessings. Go on with the knowledge you've gleaned from us. So you've already got permission. So we've got to tell ourselves, okay, I got to be brave. It's about me. I can't hold anyone else accountable or put the standards on the hook. Nope. The standards aren't the curriculum. I can't say, well, my principal won't let. You've already got your license. You passed your exams. You've got permission. So you need to make the decision to be brave. So that's where that comes from. So every time I teach, no matter what it is, it always comes back to me asking students this question: who is the trained, qualified professional certified to teach young citizens? And there's this quiet, this time I'm like, this is not a rhetorical question. Who's the trained, qualified professional certified to teach young learners? And eventually everyone's like, us. And I'm like, okay, I don't need you to say us. I need you to take it personal. Who is it? And they're, me. That's right, you. So once you realize it's me, like, oh, it's me. Okay, so if I don't do it, then it won't happen. Right. Under your year, under your academic year, if you don't do it, it's not happening. So that's why I say it takes bravery. It's really just realizing who we are as professionals and walking that professionalism.
Oh, there is so much, so much I want to touch on. I'm just going to go back. So this was so powerful to me. Like in the post for this podcast, I am highlighting this quote from you.
Oh, gosh.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
So you said, students can sense when you're trying to feed them something you're not eating. Oof. That is huge. That is huge. And just like relative to your idea of brave teaching, of how, like, if you don't do it, it's not happening. Like, you're the trained professional, so you better get trained in these things that matter. So much of what we're coming on here to talk about has to do with the fact that the content. Like you said, you're trained in the content. You're trained in the methodology of how to teach social studies, math, science, English, art, like whatever your specialty is, or if you have specialty in like multiple fields, like that works too. But like, that kind of thing. And to me, that just like referring back to really like the core of what this podcast is about, like, if you don't know how to take care of yourself in order to be brave, if you don't know how to be vulnerable enough with your teaching and with who you are outside of teaching in the classroom, your teachers, your students aren't going to buy it. Like, they're not going to buy into what you're doing. They're not going to trust you, because you're not eating that yourself. Like, you're not going into life like full force, even if you ask them to do that. And that is so huge. And we talk about how like so much of like being brave in certain situations, or just being smart, I guess, being smart more versus like being brave about the way that you're teaching.
Sure.
Like being smart has to do with like you're doing the scaffolding, you're doing the differentiation. Maybe you bring in a book or two to your classroom that shows minority populations in a powerful role. Maybe you like have teacher student conferences, maybe you have parent teacher conferences, maybe you're, I don't know, showing interest, like asking students to share a little bit about themselves in the beginning of your class when you're really just building the foundation of those relationships. But if you're not doing the same, you're not doing much, like, because you're not being brave about the way that you're going about teaching. And that's so huge.
It is. And I call it bravery because, and again, this is just my personal observation, and my, experiences. We don't call it bravery if everyone is doing it. If everyone's doing it, then it's considered the norm, even if it is something brave. We just lump it in the category of, well, that's normal. So what we're both saying here is we need to normalize. We need to normalize authenticity. We need to normalize taking care of yourself. We need to normalize. Okay. We need to normalize parent-teacher conferences. We need to normalize highlighting the voices of those who are pushed to the margin. Yeah, we got to normalize all of that. So, yeah, that's my roommate. She had to step in.
No, you're good.
But yeah, that's what it takes. And until we make it the norm, then it will be like, oh, wow, you're meeting with a parent. You're meeting with that parent. Wow, and I wouldn't do that. That's brave. Or you're going to read that book. Wow. Man, you're going to have who as a guest speaker? So again, it's those moments that as the teacher, because we really are the gatekeeper to the curriculum. And I know as a new teacher, trust me, I remember as a new teacher, or even if you've been teaching for some years, you always feel like the powers that be are dictating what we're doing. And I don't deny that. I don't deny that. There are administrative things and red tape and all it is there. But how that gets translated to our students, if we decide whether or not we're going to do it, that's what takes the bravery. Because, the powers that be tell us, don't run a red light, but we run them. The powers that be may say, don't make a right turn on this red light. Do not. But we decide, look, if I'm in a hurry, I need to break this law. And so we do it in our normal lives. But in teaching, sometimes it feels like we succumb to, well, they said, but we don't adhere to they said when, they said, I don't know, don't go in this door. But we're like, well, I need to go through this door. I'm not going to walk all the way around. So we break the rules all the time. We do that. It's just for teaching. And I'm a teacher, so that's where I'm coming from. It seems that we feel like, man, our hands are more tied, but we're brave in other ways. We're brave in other ways. And I'm just saying, let's bring teaching along with that, seeing how we are educating young citizens. At what point do we say, you know what? I know they said that this is not an approved book because a parent may not like it, but you know what? I don't want my children growing up I don't want my students who are going to be citizens growing up to be biased. I don't want them to grow up being prejudiced. I don't want them to grow up being ignorant. No. And who better than a trained professional to help you really understand what this means? Because educating students about something does not mean we are advocating for a particular stance, a political party, a certain agenda. I'm advocating for their education. That's what I'm advocating for. I don't want them to be ignorant because, again, they're not going to stay those cute little kindergartners with big heads and little bodies. They're going to grow up into an adult, and we've got to view them that way. And do we make things developmentally appropriate? Yes. I'm not saying talk about things to a kindergartner the way you would to a sixth grader. Remember, we're trained professionals. We're not going to do that. But do we not talk about things and then wait until they get to middle school? Because they're going to learn about it in middle school. Yes, they
Or
are.
if they don't learn it in middle school, they're going to learn it in high school. Or if they don't learn about it in high school, it's college. Or not, if they don't go to college, it's adulthood, it's in the workplace. And at that point,
At that
like, is
point,
it too late?
at
At
that
that
point,
point, if they feel so behind in whatever regard, like in whatever knowledge, whether it's content, whether it's social, whether it's emotional, whatever knowledge it is that they feel they don't have, that in a way like that detriments them,
it
because they're
does.
like, I'm stupid, I should have learned that, or my school failed me, it's not even my fault. And then it starts the blame game, and you get into all of these things that really don't actually do anything for them, because we see that as soon as we like catch on to a negative emotion like that, it doesn't move us anywhere. We stay
It does.
very
We
closed
do.
into one spot,
We do.
or we flee.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean,
and
there are
and
whole book
neither of those are
titles
truly an
dedicated.
option if we want to get anywhere, or if we want our
There are
students to
whole,
get anywhere.
yes. I mean, there are whole book titles dedicated to lies my teacher told me. I wish I knew this. I mean, those are legit book titles.
Mm-hmm. I have one on my floor right now. It says, "I wish my teacher knew." Um, and that's
Yeah,
something that, like, I know that students wish that, and
they do.
um,
So
kind
again,
of
it's not
going.
just the content, it's, as you said, it's emotional. Like that carpet time, people think that's so cute. No, they're developing that social emotional learning. We
Mm-hmm.
greet each other when we come in. We work out disagreements. If I, a feelings chart, all this stuff, folks that aren't educators may think, oh, that's a cute decoration. And even us as educators, if we don't take it seriously, we just view it as a thing. But no, we're educating citizens. I need my students, future citizens, to know how to disagree, to know how to argument, or how to have the argument, or articulate their feelings, express their emotions, and be able to work through them. Like that falls under us as well. I mean, parents are trusting us with their most prized possession. A parent shared this with me, and I will never forget it. Parents are trusting us with their most prized possession. A good friend of mine, Willisha Scaife, she said this to me, and I will never forget it. We teach our kids, don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to strangers, but you introduce them to a stranger on that first day of school.
Mm-hmm.
That's us. And so parents are trusting us with their heart, whether we think they're good parents or not. They're trusting us. So we've got to give that holistic care that whole day. So it's not, as you said, it's not just that content, but be brave enough to discuss those social emotional things as well. So I'm glad we're talking about this today, because it takes the whole thing. It takes the whole thing.
Um, Something that you said made me think of my first day of class in your class. When you're like, you do that, you bring that guest in, you talk about that book. And I was thinking, like, I guarantee that there are professors or teachers out there who, if they sat in your first day of class, they'd be like, you talk to your kids about that happened in your life, because you were. And do you mind me sharing at all, like, what I
No, go
remember?
right
Okay.
ahead. Go right ahead.
Like, I mean, you talked about going through school and like very intimate moments you had with your mother growing up. You talked about what it was like for you to be a college student. You talked about getting your first car on your own and getting your first apartment on your own. And those are things that we are going through too, or that
Yeah.
we have gone through, or that we're scared to pursue,
Yeah.
because what if it doesn't work out well? You talked about losing your parents. And that is like on a first
I
moment of
sure did. Oh my
introduction.
God.
But here's the thing. Here's the
I sure
thing.
did.
Talk about authenticity. That's what you were doing, and you were modeling that for us and showing us that that is okay to do,
Mm,
even if other people out there are afraid to do that. Like, that was such a moment, and that, like, probably one of like the most influential moments of that class for me, whether or
wow.
not you wanted it to be. Like, that
Wow.
was that was huge for me that you did that, because so much of what I've felt, I'm gonna get like emotional over it. Like I
No,
felt that
I
I've
feel it
lacked,
coming too. So you're in good
yeah.
company.
So much of what I lacked coming into college, and just like pursuing a collegiate degree and whatever like form of professionalism was coming after that, so much of what I lacked had to do with like feeling connected to anything. And you doing that in the first 45 minutes of us knowing each other made
Yeah.
me feel more connected to my education and
Mm,
to this space where I'm only an hour and a half away from home, but even still, like that was huge for me. And if that had happened more frequently at the beginning of college, I don't know if I
yeah.
would have struggled as much. I would have felt
Yeah.
comfortable going to my teachers and talking to them about what I was struggling with, but I didn't,
Yeah.
because it was just so different from what I had before in high school and what I knew I needed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you're right. Like, if you don't do it, who's going to do it? You got to
Yeah.
do it. You got
We
to show
do.
them, you've got to show your students what it means to be vulnerable and how it's
Mhm.
okay to be vulnerable,
It's okay.
how talking through those emotions is not shameful. It is
It's
not
not.
shameful.
It's
And
not.
studies have even found, I'm looking at one right now,
Hmm.
um, it came out of the Minnesota State University. But basically, these researchers, Auger and Jeffrey, they found that students value teacher characteristics that include fairness,
Hmm.
authenticity, and quality teaching.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
those,
If kids don't know anything else, they can tell when something is not fair. They may
mhm,
not get the word diversity. They might not understand prejudice or bias or, you know, multiplication. I'm throwing out terms, but they can sense when something is not fair. And you're right. Um, it does make the experience more authentic. It makes the teacher more, we want to be liked, but man, being vulnerable is not the same as being unprepared,
mhm,
because I can anticipate, and I'm thinking about first year teachers, that first 5 years when you try so hard. I remember those years. I wanted to do everything right. I really thought I was doing something. I told you all this, but it's so true. I really thought I was doing something when I knew how to make front and back copies. I really thought I was doing something. I didn't have to ask the secretary, now what's that again? But being vulnerable does not mean you're unprepared. It doesn't mean that you don't know your content. It doesn't mean that you haven't studied. It means you're honest. And we want our students to be vulnerable. They come to school every day as a sign of vulnerability. Every day they show up saying, I don't know, and you're going to have to teach me. I mean, think about it. Every day they come being vulnerable. I don't know something, and you're going to have to teach me. And as a teacher, we admit it gets a bit frustrating. We're like, look, this is how you, and they, I know. And you're thinking, no, you don't, because you're doing it wrong, right? But as educators, if we, as you said, if we don't model that, it just means we're being honest. So if kids are coming in every day saying, I don't, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be open and expose that I don't really know how to do this. We can do the same thing in our content. And speaking specifically about social studies, I cannot come into my class, walk into a teaching profession that is predominantly white, middle class female, and not acknowledge that I'm a Black woman. That would be silly to just come in and act like the skin I'm in, the experiences I've had are not a factor that have helped shape me. So when we talk about, instead of being colorblind, but being color brave, I have to remind myself, again, I've been teaching over 10 years. I have to remind myself, okay, Dorshele, this is it. Don't forget, just because we're talking about colorblind, and being color brave, you were being color brave just the day before. Now that we're explicitly talking about it, don't shrink back. So I have to give genuine, authentic experiences and respond honestly when you all ask questions, or when you all share with me like, man, this is the first class that really helped me realize I can say Black, that my teacher is Black and I'm not being racist. I'm like, yeah, because I am. That doesn't make you racist. And I'm not racist if I say the majority of my kids in here are white. I'm not adding anything. We're seeing who we are and not moving despite. We're moving with our differences. Man, we're moving with. That's what I mean by not saying despite. No, we're moving with. So yeah, I have to come with that vulnerability every day, realizing I may be the first, African-American female in higher ed that my students may have ever had, or just period. Now, for me, it was the norm for me to have Black teachers. I grew up in Gary, predominantly African-American city. So it was like normal. But I intentionally came to Ball State, one, because that's where you go when you want to be a good teacher, like chirp, chirp, got a plug, right? But also, I know the world doesn't look like what I grew up with, and that's anybody's house. The world does not look like your house. So you got to allow yourself to go in some spaces where you're being a bit vulnerable and you can learn. So yeah, it takes that even on this level. Yeah. But vulnerability doesn't mean you're not prepared. It just means you're honest. So I wanted to be sure, because I could hear someone potentially thinking, but if I'm vulnerable, then students may think I don't know anything. You're the teacher. They know you know stuff just by the title. I'm the teacher. So by saying, you know what, that really made me sad when I read that. When you share that, that you're upset, or, whatever the scenario is, to be a human and say, you know what, I am so sorry that happened. Or if a teacher made a mistake, you know what, let me apologize. I don't know how many teachers really apologize. And I'm not trying to bash my profession. I love being a teacher, but we're so accustomed to thinking we have to be right and we have to be on point. It's okay to say, you know what, Miss Dr. Stewart I do not know that answer, but you know what, let's look it up. Because I think I want to know too. Students don't translate that as, see, I knew you didn't know. They're like, oh, my teacher didn't know something too. We're about to learn together. It's a lean in moment, not a, it isn't viewed that way.
Well, and the thing is, if you are honest and vulnerable and authentic in that moment, that's so much more relatable than if you were to dig your heels in and say, no, this is right, but this is right too. You know what I mean? Like try to like cover your tracks, but also like move in the right direction once you realize you messed up. Like there's a difference between those two ways of handling that.
There is.
And talking, I just like, there's also a difference between like a fear-based vulnerability, like claiming you're vulnerable, but you're fearful of that, and claiming you're vulnerable and owning that. The fear-based that's what causes people to run up, like backtrack in those moments and dig their heels in or avoid it altogether. I'm not even going to have this conversation right now. I don't want to think about how I feel about that. I don't want you to see how I feel about that. I don't want you to see me any differently in a negative light because of whatever just happened, or because I'm going through this in my personal life. I don't need you to know about that because I don't need you to see me in a negative light. And students go through that with us as well. Every single day they come in, and there's been the same study talked about how so many students feel a sense of powerlessness and how they're perceived by their teachers. And that's because, I mean, it is the teacher's job, like at the foundation of things, to open up a relationship where students have power in their role to communicate who they truly are, but they're not going to do that unless the teacher does that first.
You're right.
And having that experience is it's so influential to how they may go about building their own relationships. And building the relationship with you as the teacher through all of like the moments to come between you two.
and students won't lose respect for you. I've learned that. I mean, I openly would admit when I was teaching fourth grade, something about being at the chalkboard or the whiteboard, and this is the honest to goodness truth, and spelling, openly spelling. And this is just a classic example of allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which we're translating as being honest. Okay.
Mhm.
When I'm at the whiteboard, for some reason, my brain does not want to spell right. I don't know what that is. So, like this poster behind me, you don't have to ask for permission, just teach. As I was writing it out, I was thinking, that is how you spell like permission, right? Or, you know, just little things. And by just fully disclosing that to my students, they would be, Miss Stewart, Miss Stewart, it's hard for you to spell some words too. And I'm in that moment, just like you said, I can be afraid of being vulnerable or I can own it, right? I can say, yep, Miss Stewart has a hard time spelling words too. That's why I have to use that dictionary. That's why I have to sound it out. That's why I teach you all to do it. Now I've made a connection. Now I've made teaching and learning meaningful.
Mhm.
Translate that to college. And I've shared this multiple times with you all. You know, I frequently misspell words and I'm not proud of that. I want to be better, but it's my thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm typing and the red squiggly line or the green squiggly line, and I have to tell myself, Dorshele, if you misspell a word and a student catches it, it doesn't mean they're going to drop the class. It doesn't mean I'm just giving you all the things that pop up in my
Well,
head.
yeah.
You
Sorry
know,
for laughing.
no, but you know, it doesn't mean that you aren't professional. They aren't thinking, oh my God, I knew you weren't prepared. I mean, all these misconceptions, all these untruths pop up in my mind, or biases that I think you all may have about me. You know, like, man, this class isn't going to be serious. Or does she really have her doctor? I mean, all these things that pop up in my mind just because I allow you all to see my poor spelling at times. And that never happens. You all get a kick out of being like, Dr. Stewart, permission is, and I'm like, oh crap, you know, and I have a full oh crap. And I erase it and we giggle about it. And now we've made a connection. Now you all see my area of vulnerability. And when we have one-on-one meetings, there isn't this awkwardness, right? We've both been vulnerable together. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I
No.
still live that thing. I haven't graduated from being vulnerable or my flaws or shortcomings, but it doesn't mean I'm not prepared. Being vulnerable does not mean you're not prepared. It doesn't mean you aren't being professional. You're still the teacher. Students are never going to forget that. But I think sometimes as new teachers, we feel we just got to be on and we got to know everything. And students appreciate somebody they can connect with. They do.
Mhm. And I mean, we also know so much that like talk about like, well, we're building relationships, right? And those moments help build those relationships. And we know that the stronger a relationship is between a teacher and a student, because like not even just going to cite one study, there are so many out there. You could look in any textbook
Oh, yeah.
about anything and related to teaching. And at some point in the book, they're going to talk about how student teacher relationships needed attention given to them.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're not allowing yourself to have those moments, you are missing out
Oh, yeah.
on building that relationship. And when you miss out on building that relationship, you're missing out on helping your students achieve greater than they thought they could.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
missing out on maybe it's advancing their math scores for the next big test coming up. Maybe it's knowing the connection between how social studies and like writing, reading and writing, like how that all works. Like
Yeah.
there's just so much that you have to teach them. And if you're not building that relationship, you're missing out on not only the relationship, which will benefit both of you, because
Mhm.
it gives them a role model that outside of their family that is essential. It's
Yeah.
Ted or Peter Benson talks about it in like what kids need to succeed. Having role
Mhm.
model outside of the house is so important for students. It's one of those many assets that is necessary to a child's life to help build them up and help them become successful and achieve their goals and their dreams.
Yeah.
But also, you're missing out on that relationship because your students can teach you so much too. And also
Oh
just
God,
being
yes.
open to that, like, is so important. And you never know what you're going to miss or what they're going to miss if you are just so afraid of
Yep.
showing them those things and being honest, being open. And
Yeah.
real quick,
Yeah.
when I laughed at like the things that go on in your head, like when you do those things, I was thinking about like, why did I laugh? But it's because those negative thoughts that we have relative to ourselves, it's just us. Like, it's
Yeah.
really 99.9% of the time, it's only us who thinks those things.
It
And to
is.
everyone else, it is laughable. Like, it's like so absurd that
Right.
that would be a thing. And
Yes.
you know, like, part of you probably knows that, but it doesn't change those thoughts from coming about in the first place. And it's just so, I don't know, it just shows us that, like, therefore, because being vulnerable doesn't actually mean that these people are going to assume these things about us. They're not laughing like at us necessarily. They're
Oh.
laughing at those silly thoughts that we're having in relationship to being vulnerable. Like, it's okay. Therefore, it's okay. Like, it's not
Yeah.
the end of the world. It's not going to hurt you. But coming to know that, like, truly know that,
Yeah.
is such a skill. And it's like, it truly is like building vulnerability and understanding the importance of attending to your emotions and being honest about your emotions with yourself first, with your students, with your colleagues, whoever, your family, your friends. It happens outside of school too, because we are people first. Like,
Yeah.
we have lives outside of school, and if we're not attending to those things, then we're only hurting ourselves. But it is like this process of self-care, self-healing, self-awareness, and working on vulnerability is like building a muscle. It's something that you have to practice at. It's
Yeah.
something that those small moments of like not spelling something right, I don't know if that, like, what level of insecurity that is for you, but like, that's here. This is the spelling insecurity, right? Like, that's here compared to other things.
Yeah.
um it's low on the line of things that you can be vulnerable about, and but you could use that as a moment to practice doing vulnerability in front of others, so that you can do it in greater amounts as time goes on, just like increasing your weight in the gym. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, yeah,
That's
it's
good. That
yeah.
is good. And you know what? It's teaching, it's a noble profession, but what makes it a noble profession is what we do. Like, we want to help educate young citizens. It doesn't mean that we're perfect. And so we're not going to live lives that are free of errors. Something you said made me think about that. Like, wow, as teachers, we feel like we we've got to be perfect sometimes, and we're on this pedestal, and folks, society may view us, it can fluctuate. One day we're a babysitter, the next day, we're the most noble profession. But as long as we know that we're stable in knowing who we are, which is a human being that is flawed, that has nothing to do with, or that won't, us being human beings will not negatively impact our profession or what we do, right? I'm a flawed human being, but I am passionate about teaching, and my flawed human being self is allowed to be flawed in certain aspects, to teach my students. And that is not to be mistaken. Vulnerability is not to be mistaken with transparency either. Because as a teacher, is it okay to be vulnerable and say, I'm a poor speller too? Yes. as a teacher, is it appropriate to be transparent and say, my head is hurting because I drank too much with my friends last night? No, right? So there is a difference. We can be vulnerable, but we don't necessarily have to give full disclosure, transparency about all
Right.
of that. And not because I'm this perfect noble being. No, because it's inappropriate for young learners. That's
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well,
I want to be
Dr.
sure to reiterate that.
Yeah. Well, and Dr. Brené Brown, who her work is in vulnerability, shame, guilt, all those things. One of her, I read it this morning. I don't even remember where, but one of her quotes is that you can't have vulnerability without having boundaries too.
Yeah.
And that's so
Yeah.
important, especially for teachers, because you're right. Like there are certain things that we just cannot have a conversation with a fourth grader about. There are certain things we can't have conversations with a kindergartner about,
Mhm.
and it goes on from there. But we can still have conversations. Our
Mhm.
level of transparency is what we decide in
Mhm.
our moments of vulnerability. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
maybe in a kindergarten class you can say, you know what, Dr. Stewart is really having a difficult time today, um, because it's the anniversary of my mother passing away, and I really miss
Yeah.
her still, and
Yeah.
that it's just a hard time for me. And I just wanted to let you guys know. And that means that if you guys ever have a hard time, I want you to know that you can come to me too.
That's a
Um,
perfect example of how to do that.
and
Perfect example.
and that can change the way that you have those moments, and your level of transparency with those moments and the
Mhm.
events can
Mhm.
change or be exactly the same. If you want to treat a group of sophomores in high school with that same level of transparency about that event in your life and how it affects you, that's okay,
Mhm.
because that's the boundary that you're setting in that moment of vulnerability. But you could
Mhm.
also feel free, if you're comfortable with it, to be more transparent with them because they can understand that loss a little more, most likely.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe they haven't lost a parent, but at this point in their life, they've lost a grandparent or they've
Mhm.
lost an aunt or an uncle, and understanding that you feel that pain too. And
Mhm.
that just because you feel that pain and it's a hard day doesn't mean you're a failure as a
Mhm.
person and as a
Mhm.
teacher.
Mhm.
Means that they are also not. And they are also open to feel those things. And that goes back to, I think, like affirming your students, like what you talked about at the beginning with brave teaching. Like
Mhm.
it's maybe not a situation of applauding or booing them, but you are allowing them a safe space
Yeah.
to more fully be who they are and feel what they feel.
Yeah.
And it's not weakness to bring that into a school setting. It's not
No.
weakness to bring that into a professional setting.
No.
In fact, it's just real, and we all deal with different moments, like
We do.
that. And so the way that we build in our boundaries to our vulnerability relative to the level of transparency we
Mhm.
give them is so important, and understanding that is so important.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And even sharing those things doesn't lessen the expectations. Like students, I mean, I remember now in sharing those things about you all about me on the first day of class. I remember when I shared, both of my parents, them passing, I, in explaining that, I love them and still miss them every single day. Um, I share that with you all to let you all know that I understand how life can happen and how it can devastate you. And so when you're dealing with life, I get it, right? And so it's an opportunity, as you said, to be like, oh wow, okay. And so it has happened. In me sharing that first day of class, things that are big to me and things that are big losses for me, I've had students reach out to me and say, Dr. Stewart, I'm having a hard time today. And, without giving too much information, but because they saw me do it, right? They feel comfortable to be honest and realize I'm not going to view them as a flaky student. And so
mhm,
if a 19, 20-year-old could be honest and say, I'm not having a good day today. I really am sick. And I'm like, stay home, right? Life is happening. And so we can have those conversations and think about it. If big kids, I call y'all my big kids, if big kids still need that, there's certainly little kids, they need that. And you're right. To my kindergartners, I may say, Miss Stewart, his heart is just hurting a little bit today. I just feel sad today. And without even maybe going into that much depth, I'm saying, I'm a little sad today, but I'm here because you all always cheer me up. But if you see me just not smiling, Miss Stewart's just a little sad today. But I'm going to try to get better. It does the exact same thing that you said, like, wow, well, I hope you feel better. I remember when I was sad. Now we're building community. Mm-hmm. And you're right. If I want to give the full explanation to middle school or high schoolers, I've now opened the door for students to potentially come to me. I may help prevent a suicide. I may help prevent someone going into depression. I may be the door to open someone to say, you know what, maybe I should go talk to the school counselor. They're there. So we never know, as you said, what we're modeling to let students know, hey, it's okay if I don't have it all together, because my teacher isn't perfect, right? And it's okay. And I still trust and respect them. Hey, it's okay if I'm not okay, or if it's okay if I'm not perfect, or I don't have all the answers. I have someone I can talk with about it that's going to lead me in the right direction. Yeah, mm-hmm. But you're right, Emma. We've got to be vulnerable. We've got to establish that community. I promise it does not lessen our role or make us any less essential or any less trusted or respected by our students. If anything, it's going to solidify and fortify that. We're more human. You said it perfectly.
Yeah. And just as far as like our students go, like as far as like your big kids needing like that kind of space and conversation versus your K through 6 kids needing that. I'm reading this book right now by Dr. Mark Brackett from the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. And he talks about how, gosh, it's so essential for our students to see this and to understand the importance of like regulating those emotions and like at a point when we're comfortable with it, being vulnerable about our emotions, because our students, like our kids, haven't yet learned how to put their feelings on the back burner. That's something you develop as you grow. And it's not a good thing to develop necessarily. Like it's very, very detrimental to bottle up those feelings, to negate them, to refuse to feel them, because the way they present themselves then can turn into anger. It can turn into depression. It can turn into anxiety. It can become like very detrimental forms of trauma. There's just
and that really is how and that's how it manifests itself in school. Mm-hmm. Kids are there. So one day they're just very angry, and you're right. They're in first grade. They've only been on the planet 7 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, how long did it take us to get to learn our campus? Mm-hmm. Right? 4 years. Okay. So can we expect a 4-year-old to really know how to articulate why I'm mad, or a 10-year-old to express why they just blew up one day? They don't. You're so right, because they don't have that sophistication to articulate with their words. It has to manifest itself some way. And so kids just aren't bad. They're not. Mm-hmm. They're not. I mean, there's a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason why your child is just angry all the time. There's a reason. Something is going on. And it takes us having those honest conversations with our kids and not viewing them as, oh, I'm using you. Oh, here comes Emma. She's always angry about something. But really investigating, like, I wonder why. And especially if it's just with me, right? If she's grinning around her friends, but when she comes around me, as a teacher, I don't view that as, that's right, I'm the teacher, you ship up or shape up. No, we get to the bottom of that. and get to the bottom of it. Because you're right, as adults, we bottle it up and it is unhealthy, and it still manifests itself in unhealthy ways with addictions, with poor habits, eating disorders. I mean, just
School dropout,
full dropout. Kids
negative
just,
like bad relationships with spouse and parents and sisters and brothers and friends, like whatever. And on top of that, kids also like, along with not being like, not having the know-how on how to just like toss
yeah,
their emotions aside, they are, their emotions are running rampant because
yeah,
of the way they're developing. Like they
yeah,
have them so quickly. You can see a kid go from crying to running on the playground in a matter of 3 seconds,
yeah,
because it just happens like that for them, and it's all day long. And if, like, it just, if we don't do anything about it, if we don't give them that space, then we're doing
yeah.
them a disservice.
We are. We
Um,
can't just say no. We can't just say stop it. Sometimes we
yeah.
need to investigate. Now, we may need to say stop it for that moment, like, no, 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 come on. But at some point in the day,
hmm
as the teacher, remember the trained professional, we're the professional. At some point, we've got to have that one-on-one time to say, okay, I know I asked you to, take a minute and sit down and breathe and collect yourself. Now, what was that about? Because I'm really concerned. There's a
hmm
teacher here, Faith Surf. She is a staff at Longfellow Elementary, and I promise you, she is just like the epitome of the type of teacher I would want to be if I'm in a classroom right now. She fully embraces the whole child, the academics of them, and the emotional, the social emotional. So if there is something that happens, she's like, okay, and she'll just it right then. Okay, we need to talk about this now.
hmm
Let's have a conversation. And there isn't a confrontation. It's like, now what's going on here? And after they get to the bottom of it, she's like, okay, so do we feel that we need to ask some people for an apology? Is this resolved? I mean, she really helps students go through that whole process, and it's a beautiful thing. So it is possible, and it is something that we as teachers have to realize. This is just as important to make time for as we do to make sure I got to get math in today. I got to get reading in today. It's just as important.
And also, we need to do that with ourselves, because the way
Yes.
that we are feeling is going to affect how we react to our students. Um,
Yeah.
same book talks about how our negative emotions can sometimes get us the opposite of what we need. Like maybe we're having an emotion and it's indicating that we need a certain thing. We need some kind of care, or we need some sort of attention, or we need some kind of reaction from someone. But instead, like you said, like we punish, or we put them in the corner, or we shut them down, or we yell at them. But something that's really important, I think, for teachers avoiding that kind of reaction to students' negative emotions is thinking, like reflecting inside really quickly. And it can happen in a matter of seconds. It can be something that you practice um, through like exercises and mindfulness, or just like, I mean, you can journal. I mean, I know that those are really like stereotypical forms of self-care, but there's
They
other
are.
ways too. And they're still valuable even if they're stereotypical. But
They are.
taking a moment to assess, wait a second, I don't feel good about how I just snapped at Susie. What is going on with me that caused me to do that? And taking that moment to think inside and like recognize, oh, it's because I didn't get enough sleep last night because I stayed up all night working on papers when I should have done that earlier in the day. Or
Mhm,
it's because I'm having this really difficult situation in my life outside of school with my spouse that
mhm,
I just don't know how to handle it. And now it's affecting my students. Like, not taking time to address those parts of ourselves and
mhm,
really care for ourselves and heal for ourselves
mhm.
directly affects the way that we're going to deal with our students when they're having those negative emotions. And if
Yes,
we're
it does.
able to reflect on that, and then if we do choose to go the first route that you described and like telling them no in that moment but then going back to them later, we can then address the fact that, hey, you know what, Susie, I'm really sorry that I reacted to you in that way. It's because I'm going through this right now. And again, adjusting our
Right.
level of transparency in that
Yeah.
moment,
Right.
but still being vulnerable and showing them I'm also like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's because I'm feeling certain things in this part of my life, and I I let that affect how I reacted to you. But honestly, I'm really concerned about you. Is there anything that you need to talk about? Is there any reason that you were acting or feeling the way that you were showing me through whatever they did? Right?
Mhm.
Like that is so huge. And teachers learning the importance of that and taking the time to engage in that kind of work is, again, just so important. And also, it's so beneficial for building those relationships and contributing to students' abilities to see themselves as living, breathing people as well who have their own lives that they're dealing with,
Yep.
and learning how to regulate their emotions in each part of their life and seeing how they affect each part of their life is so beneficial
Mm-hmm.
because it can affect their success in school, it can affect
Mm-hmm.
their success in their relationships, it can affect how they view themselves, like their sense of self-efficacy and their
Yeah.
self-esteem.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just it's so interesting how all that's connected, and really just highlights to me the necessity of this type of work.
It is. And you're right. A key to that is, as educators, again, yes, we have a profession. People think that it's noble, but we are still human. And so with that, we need to be sure that we take the time to do things that bring us joy. That is essential. Um, in the class, well, especially when we were face to face more, I would come to class with sidewalk chalk or bubbles. And I would say, here, take this, go outside and blow some bubbles, or,
I
the
think it's
pen.
important that listeners know that you brought that to your bake kids. Like you brought that to your college class. Like that's
I did.
okay. But
I
you could
did.
have also done it for your little kids.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. And that's what I was talking about. I brought bubbles, um, chalk. There were times I would start out class, again, talking Ball State. Again, a lot of these things I wish I had learned or I had applied when I was back home teaching. So man, every time I teach you all, I feel like I'm trying to reach myself, right? But I would start class, just walking in and seeing you all stressed. I'm like, you know what? We're just gonna start our class just coloring. And so I would bring in black and white, just sheets, coloring sheets, and just let you all color for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. I've done this before, and just have soothing music playing in the background. And you all are education majors, so not very many of you needed the crayons that I brought. A lot of you were equipped with your own arsenal. So had your own crayons, had your own coloring pencils. And we colored for about maybe 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
yeah, that might have bitten into our instructional time, but that's just as important. I
Mm-hmm.
can't teach you something and you're not here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that was, again, me modeling, okay, I got to take care of myself. So us as teachers, do things that bring you joy. Do things that bring you joy. And I always say to my pre-service teachers, legal joy. Do things that bring you legal joy. Okay. So if it's going for a walk, or, eating your favorite dessert and really taking your time and eating it. My friends laugh at me because I drink warm beverages all the time, but I do because it's a moment for me. Like I got my mug right here. And it's something about having my warm cup of tea. You cannot drink it fast. You can't drink a hot beverage fast. You got to sip it. And those sips make me just, and if someone shares a dessert with me, I say this all the time, like, "Ooh, I need to make this a moment." So I'll get a slice of cake or it can be a cookie, seriously. And I'm like, wait, let me make a moment, make a hot cup of tea, and I'm sipping on it and eating so things that bring us joy, laughing, watching your favorite movie, hanging out with your friends. It feeds yourself, because, again, yes, it's noble to be a teacher, but we're human. That's just an adjective to describe what we do. We are not noble. No one's,
Mm-hmm.
because we're flawed human beings. So yeah, in order to do that self inventory, realize, wow, I snapped on my student because I'm angry. That tells me I got to take care of myself because it's negatively impacting my students. And if nothing else, your job, right? We don't
And
want to
yourself.
damage. Yeah, we don't want to damage anybody, our kids, ourselves. Yeah. So,
Mm.
so that I always say that, I'm a doctor, I'm Dr. Stewart, so I can prescribe it. The prescription is, take, and I got that from a colleague, Dr. Karen Malone. She would tell me that because I would struggle with this as well. She's like, okay, Dorshele, I'm a doctor, so I'm prescribing it. Go home and don't grade anything. Just do
Mm.
something that brings you joy. And because that
Mhm.
impacted me, I freely pass that along. Do things that bring you joy. You're allowed to do things that bring you joy for a significant amount of time because you got to
Mhm.
feed your soul. It's essential.
Yeah, it also helps combat like that teacher burnout and the teacher shortage that we have. If teachers are
Yeah.
able to view themselves as people first and to engage in that kind of um,
Yeah.
like self-care and joy work outside of school and in school, like there should be moments of joy in school. Education is a beautiful process. It's an exciting process if you let it be. And if you're not allowing your students to see that, then they're not going to value it and you aren't going to value it. It's going to be a chore for both of you.
Man,
um
Emma, I remember once, you're right. I realized one year while I was teaching, and these are my young kids. I realized, I said, you know what? I have not smiled in about a week.
mm,
I just realized that. So in that moment, and when you're teaching, there's always going to be something funny. Instead of correcting it, I just laughed because it was funny. One of the students did something. She like bumped her elbow and was like, ow. And someone else heard and they were, and I just laughed because it was funny. And then the whole class laughed and we laughed for about a good minute. And I said, you know what? I need to allow myself to participate in the joy that I try to set up for my students. So if they're having a good time coloring, and I need to get in there too. Yeah, there are always
mhm.
going to be papers to grade. There's always going to be something, but you're right. School is filled with joyous moments. It should be. And as teachers, we don't always have to sit back and facilitate and make sure that it's staying joyous. No, get in there. If they're coloring, color too. Or if they're out there at recess, I know recess duty, la la, but sometimes your kids should see you jump rope.
Mm.
Sometimes your kids should see you out there on the monkey bars. Sometimes you should play tag too. Play hide and go seek. I'm telling you, kids will just, Miss Stewart is in. Oh, it just changes the whole dynamic. I mean, so engage in those joyous moments. Don't just monitor them. Dive in there with them. You're right. That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, not just outside of school, in school too. Yeah, be a participant, not just a
Yeah,
facilitator or a manager. Participate in it too.
I think that whole just like feeling and that idea that we're on is a really good place for us to transition into the rapid fire questions.
Okay,
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so the first one, there a lot of them are like two-parters because I didn't know how to just do them as a one,
Okay,
but the first one is why did you become a teacher and why have you stayed in the profession?
I wanted to become a teacher because I like seeing kids learn. That's the truth. Remember the spark of teaching my young cousin, helping her learn how to read. And that gave me personal fulfillment, seeing her joy. And I stay in it because I still enjoy seeing people learn. And on this level, it's humbling for me to help educate teachers to be. I still love it. I still love it. So that's why I'm in it. I love helping people learn.
Awesome. If you could select one or two, if you want to do three, it's fine too, but
Okay.
one or two values that you would consider your core values. Like
Mm,
if someone came in and you were a study participant, like if I came in and was examining you and I was like, these are her core values, like these are what drive her in her life, what
mm,
would they be? And how does being a teacher feed these values for you?
mm. Passion, Honesty. Yeah, passion and honesty. Those are the two things. And yeah, being a teacher, you have to have an inner drive, because being completely frank and honest, kids are people, and there will be a day where you're like, just these people are getting on my nerves today. So you gotta have a deeper rooted, and I know that may ruin someone's ideology, but it's true. Kids are people. There are gonna be a day where you're like, is there like a full moon there? What is the matter? But you gotta have a deep drive. And that's passion for me. And because I'm passionate about helping kids learn, and I'm passionate about educating future teachers, that's what motivates me to keep going. And honesty, because I'm educating future citizens, I'm educating future teachers. I have to tell the truth. It,
Mhm.
it's, I don't want to be called a hypocrite. And I just realized that in this conversation. I don't want to be called a hypocrite. I don't want someone to say, man, Dr. Stewart, why you didn't, man, I didn't know that. Man, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you trust us with handling that information? So, yeah. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to invite in a guest speaker to give you their honesty, because you need to know the truth. And I don't want to be, this work of educating is too personal. It's too detrimental. It has such immediate impact that I can't afford to just sugarcoat some things. Make it developmentally appropriate, yes. But I gotta tell you the truth. I only get one pass with you. And I need to make it count. So yeah, passion and honesty. That is essential. With myself. So I gotta be honest with myself, like, wow, you don't know that. You better do your homework because you need to be prepared. So honesty, not just for students, but honest with myself and what I need to do. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Okay. What are either your top 3 favorite TV shows or movies of all time? As in, if you only had to watch these 3 things for the rest of your life and nothing else, what would they be?
I would. This is so funny because it's true. This is so personal and so unrelated to teaching, but you're getting to know me for real. And my best friend knows this. I will watch the Golden Girls and Frasier all day, hands down, because I watch them. And I know those shows are almost so, they're crazy, right? Frasier is so pretentious. I mean, but just the family dynamics of that show is hysterical to me. And the Golden Girls, because they remind me of my mom and her 3 sisters. It's hilarious. So yeah, Golden Girls and Frasier. I do watch them. I'm so glad we have Hulu. Like, yeah, I can watch them all day and never. I know some of the episodes by heart.
Yeah.
Those two shows there, I love them.
What would number 3 be?
Uh,
That's a
let,
harder ask.
let's see. Um, Let me see. Mm, well, see, now I feel obligated to throw in some honorable mentions, because for real, Golden Girls and Frasier's are my knee jerk. But I love the Cosby Show. I love the Goldbergs. I love um, Modern Family, because just those family dynamics, like
I
the
was
older
gonna say
I get,
this is all about family.
it is like,
You can tell where that comes into your values as well.
yeah, it's like those family dynamics, because family is students. I hear bring it back to teaching. It's their first exposure to just getting along with someone other than you, and you're stuck with them, right? And so, yeah, my mom was Claire Huxtable all day. That was funny. I mean, just her ability to not completely pop off, but say it so succinctly. You're like, I think she's fussing at me, but she's smiling. I think I should be nervous, but she's smiling and, so yeah, Cosby Show, Blackish, Goldbergs. Um, let's see, I love the show Martin too. Martin, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now I'm bringing my age. I'm bringing my age in because I was a 70s baby. So all these shows came out in the 80s. Yeah. But
So
yeah,
one of
Frasier and
those.
Golden Girls. Those are the ones that I grew into as an adult. And I see the life lessons. Like you just see life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what makes it yeah. And Frasier is terribly flawed. And he
Mm-hmm.
knows this. At the end of the day, he's like, man, I'm really flawed. And it's like, yeah, we all are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Who is your favorite teacher and why?
Oh, my favorite teacher. My favorite teacher was Miss Harris. She was my fourth grade teacher. And I really don't, let me see. She was the first teacher I had. Let me see. Yeah, she was the first teacher that I had that was unapologetically a Black teacher. Now, I grew up in Black schools, don't get me wrong, right? But she was like, like, and I'm sure she was professional, but I could see like her heart, her passion, her normalness. She brought that into school. So if someone did something, like as teachers, you don't say someone does something stupid. Like you just, that's the ultimate insult. So she would say, why are you being silly? And so she would say things like that. Or she was the first teacher I saw eat. This is so random, Emma, but these are images that stick in my mind that make her my favorite. Like she would eat crackers while she was teaching. I don't know why she would do that. Saltine crackers, as a matter of fact. But she will always have snacks. And that just stood out to me, like, wow, my teacher eats.
She was human to you. It made her more human.
She was, and so that stood out to me. Like she wanted to make sure we knew things, and her own personality was there. So if we did something right, she was, you bet you did it right. Come on. I mean, her whole personality. And if we disappointed her, oh my gosh, like I just cannot believe fourth graders. She never said boys and girls. Fourth graders. Now when you all walk down that hallway, they know that is Miss Harris's class. Now what is wrong with y'all today? I mean, those things stuck with me. Yeah, just her humanity. And I mean, she was an awesome teacher, don't get me wrong, but that's what made her my favorite. It was her humanity. Her personality. She laughed. She didn't hide her disappointment. She didn't hide if she got angry about something. Like, and she never took it out on us. But man, I love that. I love that about Miss Harris. So yeah, she's my favorite. My favorite.
Well, and you said she was your first teacher who was unapologetically Black. And I meant to bring this up earlier. You said something that made me think about this and I just forgot until now, but I don't remember. I've read so much at this point, but there was another study at one point that talked about the fact that like this work and showing like authenticity, vulnerability, all of those things is significantly more important for minority students and students of color. Like it's insane, like the difference it makes in their education, because I mean, I feel like your example works really well to show that like she showed you what it could mean to be authentically yourself in this profession that you were drawn to.
Yes.
That is huge.
Yes, especially a profession. I mean, sincerely, teaching, elementary teaching is just in the United States. It is a historically white middle class female profession. It just is. And I mean, there's study and history behind that. But when you know that's the norm, teachers, I mean, when there's a trend, if there's a norm, you adapt to the norm. You see how you fit in to the norm. And Miss Harris was not trying to be somebody that she was not. Now, that I can tell you for sure. I never saw her get into an argument with the principal. She never argued with other teachers, but she was fully herself. And I mean, Gary, yeah, predominantly white, I mean, African American, but there were still other white teachers that were there. And Miss Harris never shrunk down. There were other white teachers in our school, but she never shrunk down because, you know, being a white female was like the dominant thing. She still was true to herself. Um, she didn't she didn't try to say things in a way what people call, you know, code switching. Let me say it in a way that meets the typical vernacular. So if something was amazing, she didn't just say that's amazing. She was like, oh honey, yes. Like she would just say it like that. And other people were like, what? You know, so just things like that that were natural for her. And she didn't feel it made her any less professional because it didn't. All of us excelled in her class. Like we knew going into her class, Miss Harris, like you gonna learn in Miss Harris class. That was like as kids, it almost made us a bit intimidated, like, oh my God, I got Miss Harris. But she had such high expectations. And as a kid, you want to please your teacher. You don't know where that comes from, but you want to please your teacher. And she drew that out of us by being, yeah, fully herself. So she would wear her, you know, like me, I think about it now. I have on, you know, this African inspired jersey. She wear it, you know, she wear her kente cloth sometime, and the other day she wore normal clothes. But and she didn't have a need to explain, you know, she didn't wear it in February. You know, I mean, she just, Miss Harris was fully herself.
She was brave.
She was brave. And that's something that I still lean on myself. It's like, Dorshele, you cannot unblack yourself. Okay. So you're either going to be fully who you are or you're a fraud. And remember, I was like, I don't want to be a hypocrite because I need to teach, inspire my students, be fully yourself. So yeah, that's what that is. Be authentic. Be authentic. Yes, still, you know, keep those boundaries. Keep it professional, obviously, but you can still be authentic. And students,
There doesn't need to be such a divide between what is professional and what is personal. They're not two separate things.
No.
That's an old mindset. That's something that it doesn't need to exist anymore, and it doesn't exist anymore in so many places, and it shouldn't.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. I mean, when you think about going to the doctor's office, you have to be honest and authentic and genuine and real. You can't say, oh, I'm fine. And it's like, you're not fine.
Yeah.
And so, as a teacher, we've got to be authentic. It doesn't make us any less professional. So yeah, that's what I love the most about Miss Harris. And it's something because not all my Black teachers were like that. And I'm not saying they didn't have any Black pride. I'm not saying that. But something about Miss Harris, she just, oh my gosh, she was unapologetic about who she was. And I won't even just leave it under as a Black teacher. She was just unapologetically true to herself. And that just stood out to me. My Aunt Maddie, her and Miss Harris have that same, they were authentic to themselves. My Aunt Maddie says, honey child all the time. I don't care where she is. She could be meeting with the president. She's going to throw a honey child in there because that's just how she talks. And so I was so like, wow, okay, I can do that. Because I mean, my Aunt Maddie, Miss Harris, I mean, very, very good teachers, known, gotten awards, banquets, all this kind of stuff. So there's something to that authenticity, and students are drawn to teachers. You know, like that video clip, Rita, what is it? The Rita somebody, every child needs a champion. Have you seen that video?
Yes.
Okay,
you showed it in your class. I have it saved. It's going to be on this website.
Yes, that is Miss Harris, and that is my Aunt Maddie. So that authenticity, that connectedness, and that isn't just a secret sauce that only Black teachers have. Like if all of us would be authentic and true to ourselves, we would have those students like, man, I will never forget Miss Davidson. Man, It's certain things that we do. We're going to be memories in our students' minds for some reasons. And I would rather it be because I was authentic, I told the truth, I was passionate. Those are the things that I really want to be those takeaways.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I
It's
really
so, no, it's
elaborated on that.
okay. That's okay. It is what it is. It's a
Yeah.
conversation. Um, I'm gonna elaborate a little bit more and then we can go to the last question. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's really so cool to me. It's so special to me that I think that anyone who listens to this could agree that the way that you saw them and the way that you valued the way you saw them, it impacted you, and it made you part of who you were today because you saw that that was okay. And I
Yeah.
think that, like, as far as like students sensing what you're trying to feed them, like, I know you're trying to feed me you. Like, I know that you're trying to give me you. And I appreciate that. And I appreciated that while I was in your class. And I'm sure that there are so many people in your life who appreciate that you are so capable of just being so authentically you.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that you had those role models who showed you that shows the importance of having role models who show kids that. Because if you didn't have your aunt, if you didn't have Miss Harris, and I'm sure a part of it comes from your mom too, like, just
Yeah.
from what you've talked about her about, like, if you didn't have those people, you wouldn't be showing up today the way you are for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Mm,
special.
that is special. That makes me grateful. Oh man. Thank you for that. You connected some dots I never had before. That's a wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
All right. I'm gonna press you out of your place of gratitude for a second.
Okay.
Um, and then feel free to return. I want you to spend all day in that because it is special. It is special. Um, in one sentence, why should we explore work that encourages teachers and others to see teachers as people first?
Mm, mm, mm. If for no other, well, oh gosh, one sentence. Geez, Emma.
You can think about it like this. You can use a semicolon in there if you need to, like, make it a
Oh,
conjunction.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, because we are educating citizens, because we are educating citizens, this is hard work and it is hard work. So, and everyone isn't doing this. Everyone isn't doing it. And so we need space, we need room, we need grace, we need permission to do this work in the most authentic way. And it will only be received when it's from heart to heart, from human to human. It can't be done. It cannot be done artificially. It can't.
Hmm.
It can't. We're shaping humans. We're helping to develop humans. So it's going to take that humanity. And that is not, humanity is not perfect. So we need room, we need space, we need grace to connect heart to heart and human to human. And even in this pandemic, like, some teachers will never get to touch their students, but you can
Hmm.
be authentic and touch this way. You know, uh, yeah, we're teaching humans, so we got to make that human connection. So yeah, we
Hmm.
need permission. We need we need your blessing. We're doing it. Like, I'm doing it, right? We would appreciate your blessing if we could connect heart to heart and human to human. Yeah, because it's essential. I don't know if
Wow.
I answered.
You did. It's okay. You did it. We did it.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
done. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. It is again and again, it is such a gift to learn from you. I appreciate you giving your time to this and to me, and to our listeners. And to our listeners, I just remember, guys, like, don't forget to always view yourself and others as people first.
Yes.
Take care of yourself, spread
Yes.
love.
Yes.
And with that, I think we can say goodbye.
Oh, man.